Four, three, two, one. Let's go. Our guest today is a businesswoman, statistician, and analyst helping companies harness the power of data. She's an internationally renowned speaker who has been featured on many podcasts, in many conferences, and speaking engagements all around the world. She's a second generation Greek American who spent a decade living abroad in Madrid, Spain, and has traveled to over 50 countries, experiencing firsthand the beauty and variety of human culture and language. Not only does she have an incredibly impressive educational background, she's also worked at Google and is currently at Waze. Not only that, though, she's an adjunct faculty member at the IE Business School. She's followed a unique path to make a name for herself in the field of data science and data analytics at the global scale. So please help me in welcoming our guest today, a woman whose hope is to bring advanced data technologies to the masses, Christina Stathopoulos. Christina, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to be on the show today. I'm happy to have you here.
No,
And sorry for almost butchering your name, man. That was
no.
my
Yeah,
fault.
I was actually gonna say you did a good job with the name. People kill it sometimes, and you did good.
Oh,
So no
thank
worries.
you.
And thank you for the warm welcome, and thanks for having me on the show today.
Absolutely, it's my pleasure. So we've been like in contact through our group chats and chatting with each other for almost 2-ish years. Feels like, I'm not sure, it must have been early 2020 when all this happened. But we've never actually, got a chance to sit down and chat with each other. This is the first time for that. So I'm excited to finally get to know you and be actual friends now after this. This is gonna be great.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I want to learn a little bit more about you. So let's start with uh, talk to us about where you grew up and what it was like there.
Yeah, so I grew up in the suburbs of Charlotte, North Carolina. It was a bit quiet for my tastes if you've ever been around that area. It's really nice, very relaxed lifestyle. It's very green, good weather, minus the humidity, but I like the humidity. So I grew up there, and then I went to college nearby in Raleigh, North Carolina. I went to NC State. And actually, within a month of graduating there, I moved abroad to Madrid, Spain. So completely changed everything. Got up and left my life behind in North Carolina, moved to Spain, worked abroad, learned a new language, and then in April of this year, accepted a new job with Waze and ended up moving to New York City just a couple months ago. So lots of different moving around, but now I'm settling down in New York City.
That's awesome, man. That's so cool that you spent a decade abroad in Spain. How did that happen? Like, how did you there's like so many logistical challenges. Did you go there on a vacation? You're like, I'm just staying here, or you're like, all right, I'm going to Spain. I'm moving there. Like, how did that play out?
Yeah, there's a lot of different factors in play. I knew that when I graduated college, I was set on moving to another country, trying to learn another language. And originally, I was looking at going to Asia. So I wanted to go to Tokyo, Hong Kong, South Korea. And I wanted to go to one of these countries, do the typical like teaching English abroad while learning about the culture and learning the language. And ended up settling on Spain, didn't go to Asia, which I think was a good decision in the end, mainly because of the language. So I knew that if I learned Spanish, then I came back to the US with that language skill, then it would, I mean, it's a huge skill to have here in the US because we have so many Spanish speakers. So it ended up, yeah, I ended up settling on Spain really, a lot of it because of the language. And I was only going for a year or two. It wasn't my plan to stay as long as I did. It just kind of happened. One thing led to the other, and I ended up staying.
That's pretty interesting. Actually, I was about to teach English in Korea as well, so kind of a similar-ish uh, time frame. And like I when I was during like last couple of semesters of undergrad, I worked at a hotel as like a driver for a hotel, just driving people around. I met somebody and he was asking what I'm going to do after I graduate, and I was like, dude, I got no fucking clue. Like, the economy sucks. I don't know what's going on. He's like, you should go teach Korea in Japan, or sorry, teach English in Korea or Japan. And I was like, oh, that sounds like an interesting idea. And I was about to go through with it, like filled out the paperwork, had everything done. And it turned out that whoever like the agent was that we're going to go through, um, it didn't work out. Like it was some kind of scam or something he was running, and like it just didn't work out. And like
So you didn't end up going?
didn't end up going. No,
No.
didn't end up going. But like I was dead set on going. Like it was about to happen. So what was that experience like teaching? Like, you taught English there for a while? How'd you transition into analytics from that?
Yeah, and I was gonna say it's a pity you didn't make it because I've heard great things about teaching abroad in Korea and also in Japan. It's a really, really good experience. But for me in Spain, I did end up teaching English. I was doing not something typical. It was like freelance. So I acted as I called myself like a business English consultant, and I would go to different companies and I would work one-on-one with like different executives, many times the C-suite, helping them with their English, just because in Spain it's common to have a low level of English. And now with the world much more international, companies they need to have an international presence and they needed help with the language. So I would do a lot of like one-to-one with these executives, helping them with their reports, helping them with public speaking in English. And I did that for a while. I don't even remember how many years, but I was doing that for a few years. And then after about I think it was in my second year or my third year, I realized, okay, well, this is not what I want to do for life. Like I came here just to do this for some time for fun, kind of. And then, but I wanted to end up back closer to statistics. And I started exploring how I could do that in Spain. The way I pivoted back into it was doing a master's there. Again, I looked at doing my master's in the US, but was convinced by a program that I found in Spain at IE Business School. Did my master's in business analytics and big data, and I used that to pivot into that field. And also by that time, I was speaking good Spanish, which was a huge thing that I could speak obviously good English, and now I could be fluent in Spanish. So from there, I pivoted into the world of analytics and got different jobs and kept growing and eventually landed a job at Google Spain.
So it wasn't even like very difficult learning the analytics part because you already had that strong background. The biggest challenge it seems like was trying to learn the language while you were there. So did you know any Spanish like when you moved there, like completely nothing? How'd you learn another
Nothing.
language as an adult? Like was that challenging? Like how'd you figure that out?
It was really challenging. And they say that when you're an adult, it's much harder to pick up a language than when you're a kid. I had no Spanish when I went to Spain. I started from scratch, from zero. And what I first started with was Rosetta Stone. I don't know if you're familiar with the
Yeah,
program Rosetta Stone.
that's the OG stuff, man. That's the old school software, yeah. Before
Yeah.
Duolingo.
But yeah, no, I loved Rosetta Stone. I used that to get the basics. I was studying it on my own. I came to Spain and in the first month did like an intensive Spanish class where for 1 month all I did was study Spanish all day. I would go to class, I don't remember, like 6, 7 hours a day and then study on my own. And then after that 1 month of class, I learned it by immersion. So I didn't really do any more formal classes and learned the rest by immersion and then just by studying and teaching myself.
That's pretty much the best way to learn a language, right? Is doing it by
Yeah.
immersion. It doesn't even matter if it's
But it's
like a
hard.
it's hard, right? Because you have
It's
to.
really hard.
And so that's before a time of like Google Translate or anything like that. So that was, yeah, that's probably super
Google
challenging.
Translate, I think, was there, but it wasn't as good as it is today.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's true. Do you know any other languages?
I mean, so I speak if my wife is listening, if I tell her I speak Punjabi, she'll laugh at me. But yeah, I speak ish Punjabi and a little bit of Hindi, but mostly, English. But
Ooh,
um like I grew up in California, so we spoke a lot of Spanish in school. So like I'm pretty comfortable with Spanish. We went to Spain in uh summer 2019, and I was getting us by on Spanish. Just I brushed up on my Spanish like a month before we'd taken off, and then I had the support of Google Translate, so I was able to translate fairly easily. I don't know. I think languages is something that kind of comes easy-ish to me. My wife and I travel quite a bit as well, and even when I was we were in Croatia, like I picked up the language kind of quickly enough to like convince people within the first minute or so that I actually spoke it. Then they start talking. I'm like, got no clue what you're saying. I have to Google Translate that. But yeah, what about you besides Spanish? So you're completely fluent now, right?
pretty. Yeah, yeah. I'm fluent now. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. And then besides that, I know a little bit of Greek, but again, my family would laugh at me if they heard me saying that because I've forgotten most of my Greek. I was really good as it as a kid. I had to go to Greek school, very typical Greek American. I had to go to Greek school every day after regular school, and I used to write it and speak it and everything, read it. But then I let it go. I don't know. I stopped going to that when I was, who knows, like 12 years old, and since then I haven't practiced it, so I don't really remember it. Whenever I visit Greece, I'll hear people talking and I can pull out things that they're saying, but I would say I'm definitely back to a basic Greek language understander today.
That's still pretty cool though. You got like good immersion in your culture, like growing up. I absolutely love that.
Yeah.
So when you came back, so 10 years abroad in another country, did your original accent change? Like, do you have your friends like said they noticed the difference between how you used to talk and then how your English is now? Did that happen?
It's funny you ask that. And I wonder, have you met other people that happened to? Have you heard about this before? Because
Yeah,
it
yeah,
it did happen to me.
yeah. I've
Yeah.
definitely heard about it. So, like, one of the tour guides that when we were in Australia, she sounded completely Australian, but she was from Tennessee. And then also, like, I taught math for a while. One of my students, Kintaro Cross, who's since passed away, young kid, he moved to New Zealand and Australia. He's there for like 10 years. And then I remember him as one of my students in high school, completely just, total California accent. And then when I talked to him there, when we met up with him, he sounded completely different. So that happened to you, huh?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. My English accent is completely warped. And we didn't know each other many years ago, but if you had met me, 10, 15 years ago and then you were talking to me now, you would be like, what the heck? You sound completely different. And I get it from family and friends all the time, and people will laugh at me just because also my vocabulary has changed. And I'll say things and they'll be like, "What are you like? Why are you using that word?"
What's an example of that?
I think one of the most common ones that people laugh about is that here everybody says college, and
Hmm,
whenever I'm talking about it, I always say university, and I also
okay.
pronounce it really well. And they're like, "What are you saying? University?" And I'm
Yeah.
like, "Yeah, I don't know. I mean, because that's just what they say in Europe and in Spain. They wouldn't say college. Like if I said college, it actually throws people off in Spanish because in Spain, because in Spanish, colegio is high school.
Oh,
So if I use the word college in English, they're going to think I'm trying to refer to colegio, which is high school. So
ah,
I changed my English to say university so that people wouldn't get confused.
yeah. They say university a lot in Canada too. It's something I noticed.
Ah,
Like they don't use the word college. They also say university. When they say college, they refer to like uh, a non-university, which is like one of those, I guess, community colleges
okay.
or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
yeah.
you're quite a busy person. Like one of the busiest people that I know. I know we joke about that in our group chat. You and Kate are quite busy. How do you balance all of these activities, all of these speaking engagements and teaching, plus having like a full-time job?
It's a very good question. And I have to admit, there's no secret sauce. I think I'm very productive. I keep myself very busy, and I'm a really big fan of like keeping a checklist. I make my checklist for the week and I block it off on my calendar. Like I set aside time when I'm going to get this done, when I'm going to get this done, and I try to stick to it. And then throughout the week, I'm always updating it and changing around that plan just because the unexpected happens or some things take longer than you expected. So I try to stick to a schedule. I love being on a schedule and using a checklist and like physically checking off as I get things done. But besides that, there's no other secret. Just I try to stay on schedule and not get behind because especially if you have that many commitments, once you get behind, I mean it can kind of spiral out of control. So
Yeah, yeah, I'm a huge fan of physical checklists as well. This is
ah,
this is
I love
one,
it. I
yeah.
love
It
it.
mine's just like I don't have like a strict schedule per se. I kind of just say, all right, these are the big things that I want to get done, and I try to keep it just like three or four things. That way, just keeps me focused on the most important stuff. Um,
Yeah.
and
Do you
on
have
top of
any do you have any tips by the way? Because I know you're also you do a ton of different things. So you're very
yeah,
similar. I mean, what do you have the checklist, but is there anything
mhm.
else you do to be able to get so much done in your day?
Yeah, I keep it limited to just the highest impact activities, and I just try not to do too many of them. So I don't take on like a lot. Like I just try to make the work that I do super impactful, and then whatever I could, like, with the podcast, for example, I could pay somebody to do all the transcription and all the cleaning and uploading and all that stuff. So I just pay somebody to do that. Um, even like cleaning the house, I just pay somebody to do it. I just try to do the most meaningful stuff. The only regimented part of my day is probably my morning. That's very sequential. It'll be do my journaling, then I do some reading, and then my son will probably wake up. By this time it'll be 7:30 ish. I'll play with him, uh, specifically playing with him on in the morning Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays, because those are the days my wife has to go to work. Those other days I work on stuff and then go to the gym, shower, and then work. So that part is very regimented, but the rest of the day it's
Mhm.
just highest impact activities, especially at work. Um, whatever I could do to keep the
Oh,
needle
yeah,
moving.
you have
But
a full-time job as well, right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But dude, I'm like super distractible. Like it's very, very bad. Like it's a struggle for me to just actually focus. It's hard, man. That's why I try to keep like life analog. That's why I don't do digital books. I don't use the computer until 9:30 a.m. or whatever. Like I keep everything analog up until then. How about you? Are you quite distractible?
I am distractible, but I know that it's very important. Like multitasking is not always possible.
Mhm.
So I try to avoid it. I mean, it's really important to find one thing, stick to it, finish it, and then go to the next. The minute that I start multitasking, I get involved with a bunch of different things, and then I never end up finishing any of them. So I think there's only certain cases where multitasking works. And then also, it's funny that you said about like prioritizing the most impactful things. I think this is something I actually have to work on, is that I'm not good at saying no. And you have to get very like strategic. I mean, it's true that when you're first starting your career, you're not going to say no as often. You actually should take almost everything that you can. But as you get, further along in your career, and especially like in our cases where you and I were involved in a lot of different things, there's one point where you cannot say yes to everything, or you're gonna, you're going to have to sacrifice things in your own personal life. So one thing I'm working on is learning how to say no and be more strategic about what I do. And like you said, just find things that are more impactful. So I make sure that what I am doing is having a bigger impact and a better impact.
Yeah, I like that because earlier in your career, you're kind of exploring, then later you're exploiting. You have too much coming at your way at once. You need to filter it out and then just focus on the key stuff. Speaking about focusing on key stuff, I know you and I are both fans of reading. How did you develop this reading habit, and how are you getting all these books? Are you getting them delivered to you, or do you have like a book exchange thing? Like, how's this working?
Yes. Well, so two questions. You asked about this. How did I get involved with this reading thing? I've always liked reading. When I was a kid, I was obsessed with going to the library with my mom and renting a bunch of books and reading. And then I kind of left that habit behind later on in high school. Very typical, you become a teenager and there's more important things like your friends. Left that reading behind in high school, in university, and then later on picked it up as an adult. And I tried to stick to this book a week challenge that I do, book a week, book a month, but whatever it may be, try to pick up this habit of continuously reading every day, making it a habit, a regular thing of your day. And how do I do it? So with a book a week, it's a lot of books. So it's 52 books a year. But most of them I own. I have them here, and I'm just building out my library because my dream would be in the future to have a library in my house, like a room with all my books and be able to go and read there. So I do purchase most of my books. Where I get them is just, I mean, ordering them. Yeah, I have them delivered. What I, at least pre-pandemic, I loved when I was traveling, I would try to find local bookshops and I would try to buy books along the way. So while I was traveling, I've found some really odd, very unique books when I've traveled. Now, obviously, with COVID, I haven't been able to do that as much. So I'm just ordering online.
Mm.
But it was also another thing that I look forward to when I was traveling.
And fiction, nonfiction, what's your kind of what's your go-to? I know you do a mix, but is it
Yeah.
leaning in more in one direction than the other?
Between fiction and nonfiction, honestly, no. I think I have a pretty good balance between those sides. I have a problem that I always want to read sci-fi. So it's
Nice.
like I have to stay like keep myself away and balance the sci-fi. I love sci-fi. I also love historical fiction. But yeah, I mean, I'll pretty much read a little bit of everything. And I think that helps is when you're changing genres constantly and reading different things, it keeps your mind curious.
Audiobooks at all? Do you do audiobooks or
No.
just strictly? Yeah. Nice.
So I use reading as a time to disconnect from electronics. So I don't do
Mm.
audio, I don't do digital ebooks. I only do physical paperback books, and there's a reason for that. I mean, it's because I
Mm.
don't want to be using any sort of electronic when I'm reading.
Yeah. Yeah. Same here. I paper books. That's it, man. Like I try to read on screen. And it's like talk about multitasking. There's a thing called multi-tabbing, right? When you just have so many tabs open, it's just like too distracting. That's awesome. Yeah, that's one
Yeah.
thing I want to start getting more into is fiction. I do not read enough fiction. I read primarily like nonfiction. Um, so
I will give you
I want to.
recommendations then.
Please do. Yes,
Let me let
I want some
me
sci-fi.
send you
Yeah,
some.
yeah,
Oh yeah,
absolutely.
sci-fi.
Yes,
If you
absolutely.
want sci-fi, historical fiction, but I will send you some suggestions later on.
Yeah, awesome. I love that.
Yeah.
So let's talk more about some data stuff. I guess that's what the
Yeah.
people are here for. Uh, so when it comes to like all these careers in data science, right? In the data space, rather, I kind of umbrella everything as data science, but there's all these different roles, right? Data analyst, data scientist, machine learning engineer, ML ops engineer, so on and so forth. How can someone who's new to the space decide which direction is right for them? And how did you kind of figure out what direction you wanted to go into?
I think it's like a you have to treat it like a buffet at first because you're right, you have all of these different positions, and especially as an outsider, it's really difficult for you to see the difference between them. So treat it like a buffet and get a taste of everything or as much as possible so you can find what interests you most, and then use that to narrow down on a couple of them. And always, I mean, always keep an open mind. So don't make assumptions about a role or a path until you've really gotten to know it, because you never know. You never know what's going to end up being your calling. And then as well, keeping in mind that you can change. I mean, a lot of times people take one path, but then they evolve into another. It's very common to be a data analyst and then evolve into a data scientist, or move around from like data science to data engineering. Very, very common to move around, but it's definitely important to get kind of a concentration at the beginning and find where you're going to take that path. So I think having that approach where you get a taste of everything and start narrowing it down. And I mean, even in my case, I've changed around quite a lot since I've been working in the data space. Like I started as a systems engineer, and then I became a data engineer, and then I was an analytical consultant at Google. So my roles have changed quite a lot, but still always very like data heavy. So I would say, yeah, I would say that to treat it like a buffet. And I think one of the best ways to figure out which one sounds most interesting to you is networking and trying to talk to people who are currently in those positions. So find a way to get connected to an ML engineer, find a way to get connected to a data scientist, find some one-on-one time with them or in groups, and ask them a little bit about what their day-to-day is like, what they like about the job, what's the most challenging thing, and see which one resonates with you.
So for you, like, were you always into math? Were you always kind of like a math head? Like, because studying stats, I think you said in uh, grad school as well. Did you study stats in grad school or undergrad and then something else in grad school?
Yeah, I loved math and statistics since high school. It was my favorite subject in high school, and then in college and university, I did an interdisciplinary degree with a focus in statistics. I actually started in civil engineering, but I changed out of that. Did an interdisciplinary degree, focus in statistics, And then my master's was in business analytics and big data. So it's always had some sort of focus on analytics and statistics. And so in my case, it was very obvious that I wanted to do something in this field. And then it was just a matter of finding which position exactly do I want to go after.
That's awesome. Uh, so talked about how to find your path and how you kind of found your path. So that's all about the stat stuff. But what about the soft skills? What are some soft skills that you think have helped you really excel in your career?
And this is where I would say my business English comes into play. So I think my path was really different because I went and lived abroad, and then I did this business English consulting and teaching. And for some it might look like, I kind of went off the path completely. How do I mix that back into my journey? But I think I found a unique way to connect it in, because during those years that I was doing this business English consulting and working with very high level executives and companies, um, during all of that time, I was working on my own people skills and my own communication skills. And I was learning, in that case, I was learning how to explain complex topics. So in this case, a language, learning how to explain it so that someone coming from another language could understand it and grasp concepts and grow. So in my case, for me, it's absolutely one of the most important skills is communication. And from there, you can link that to things like networking, public speaking, people skills, but everything really falls under this umbrella of communication. And the more that you can work on it and develop it, the further you're going to go in your career in data science. And I think you would, I mean, what would you agree with that? Because you're very active and you're a big communicator as well. So I'm sure you have some thoughts on that too. Oh, you're muted.
Yes,
Now you're back.
communication. Yeah, communication definitely is key. Um, I think writing is kind of my strongest soft skill, if you can call it soft skill, because writing is extremely difficult. Um,
Mhm.
just being able to communicate clearly in written language, I think, is crucial. It's critical. So you talked about business communication, business writing for sure. I think is critical. And I've got a number of books sitting around here just how to write. There's one called Business Writing for Dummies. There's one called Everybody Writes. There's a bunch of LinkedIn courses that I've taken on business writing. So that's helped, I think, and copywriting as well. I think is super important. So persuasive communication, persuasive writing. Those are skills that I personally, I guess, just as somebody who is not just a data scientist but a content creator, and my role right now is in marketing. It's mostly technical marketing and technical content creation for the purposes of marketing. It comes into play extremely, extremely crucially. There's actually a question coming in from Katya on LinkedIn. She's saying she's from Peru, living in CA, I'm assuming California, and she's doing the inverse of you, Spanish to English. But she feels that's a lot harder. And do you have any tips or advice for her? I think that'd be an extremely well suited question for you there.
What was her name? Did you say?
Katya. Katya.
Katia. Okay. All right. Well, encantada, Katia. So you're definitely following the exact opposite of my journey. My tips would be to stick to it. I mean, I don't know how your how your level is right now with learning English as a Spanish speaker, but it takes time. It takes a lot of personal time that you have to invest in yourself to really grow in a language and become confident in it. So just stick with it. Do not get discouraged. You're going to have these ups and downs during the entire language learning. And then also, it's very important to be just if you're going into the professional world and you're doing interviews and working in English as a second language for you, confidence. So work on your confidence. It's really interesting because some of the best, we can say, best English speakers that I saw in Spain weren't necessarily the people that I was working with, these executives, and even later on when I worked in the different companies as a data scientist. But the people who I would say spoke the best English, but they were Spanish, were the people who had the most confidence. They weren't necessarily speaking without errors. I knew people who were making mistakes over and over as they spoke, but they would go there with confidence. and nobody cared about the mistakes then. You just forget it because you see them speaking with confidence. They're getting the message across. So who cares that they made a couple of grammar mistakes? Like, especially if me being knowing a second language, I know how hard it is to be perfect. Nobody cares. Go up there with confidence, speak, get the message across. That's the most important.
Interesting question coming in from Russell, friend of the show. Russell, do you find your multilingual skills with spoken and written language, do you find that they help you when translating between different coding languages?
Ah, okay. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if, and I don't know if you've seen this podcast. I had it with Ken G. Earlier this year. Yeah, earlier this year, Ken G and I was on his podcast, and we were talking about the similarities between learning languages and English, Spanish, and then learning programming languages. So they have their similarities, but then they also have their differences. I don't know if learning a language, it might have helped me with programming in the sense that it helped open my mind more, because when you only know one language, you just know English, for example, and you've never done programming, it's like you have one view of the world. And the moment you learn another language and you open your mind to Spanish or Arabic or whatever it may be, you get a new view of the world completely. And I think I would say, yeah, at least a part of me, because I opened my mind to Spanish and started seeing the world through a different lens, it also helped me with programming because I was able to get into that mindset quicker, I think. And again, seeing the world from another way, in this case, through programming and functions and computers.
Yeah, I like that question. That's interesting. So
Yeah.
anytime I apply for a job and they ask languages that uh, I always put like Python, SQL, R, VBA, so on and so forth. And it's coincidental that you were just talking about Kenji because Kenji just left a comment and said that he tuned in at the right time. So he must have heard
Re-
you through the ether and joined in on the live stream. Katya says,
Hi,
mucho
Ken.
gusto. Katya says, mucho gusto y gracias por responderme.
Nada, nada.
Yeah. So, all right. So let's talk more about, I guess, you worked a lot with executives, right? So you probably got some tips that you can share with us about how we can simplify things for executives. Because not only did you have to simplify things that were complex topics, you had to simplify it into another language. So I'm sure you got some killer advice on what to do in those situations.
Yes, simplifying for executives. And I've definitely had a lot of experience with that when I was dealing with the language learning and teaching. But nowadays, when it comes to like working with data and explaining different data insights to executives or to clients and so on, I would say that when I'm preparing these things, and especially because I teach a lot of classes, and in my classes, I'm always trying to find ways to explain these complex topics, maybe to beginners. And the key thing is really just practice. So before I go to a meeting or to a class, a training, I invest a lot of time into sitting down, going through my presentation, my slides, my doc, whatever it is, but also going through like pretending I'm in that situation right now and literally talking out loud and going through how would I explain this to them. And I've tried to put myself in their shoes. So you might know what is something as simple as like linear regression, for example. But I try to put myself in the shoes of a business person who's maybe never been through a full statistics course. So how would I explain that to them? So it's putting yourself in their shoes. And then before you go to these moments, these meetings or presentations, you sit down and you speak it through. And you think, okay, would they really understand this? Like, have I made any assumptions coming into this thinking that they would understand a concept when they don't have statistics knowledge. So yeah, I think that the key here is just practice and putting yourself in their shoes before you get to the actual moment of the presentation.
So when you put yourself into their shoes, like, is there kind of like a universal thing that most CEOs tend to care about, or universal points that you've noticed through, all these interactions that you've had, um, if such a thing could exist?
I don't know if there's a universal point. I think the best thing you can do is when you're explaining something is using examples. So making sure that whatever you're presenting, you're showing them a real life case, a real life example, of something that they are close to. So you're really bringing it down to their level, and you're showing them what value can this bring to their world.
Yeah, so I guess like the power of story at that point, right? Like making those numbers not be these lifeless digits on a screen, but actually connecting it to a story, connected to their customers and
Yep.
things they care about. Absolutely love that. By the way,
Yep.
Scott Taylor is in the house. Scott Taylor says, "What an experience, business English consulting." This interview is happening on the heels of you just linking up with everyone. You were hanging out live and in person with Kate, George, Ben, Scott, and Diana.
And Diana. Yeah.
How was that? Did you guys have a good time? Was anybody shorter than you thought they would be in person?
We talked about this in person. We
Yeah.
we had this discussion actually. So, well, for those tuning in right now and that don't know, yesterday we all got together at the headquarters of Datacated, and we were all hanging out. And yeah, we talked about this. We were just hanging out in one of the rooms, and we were like, oh, did anybody come here and get surprised by seeing someone? Like maybe they were much taller than you expected, much shorter, but no surprises in our case. Like everybody, Kate, Ben, Scott, Diana, George, everybody is what I expected them to be. And
Yeah.
I
So
got to
we,
see when one of the comments was we got to see the back of their heads for the first time.
yes, that's a good one. That's actually a good point. Yes, seeing the back of somebody's head. Um, I always wonder if when people meet me, will I sound different in person? Because obviously, the mic and how close I am to it just makes my voice sound different
You
than
sound
it
very
probably
like
does.
radio host professional.
Well, thank
I
you,
don't know.
thank you.
It sounds very, I don't know. I like it. I like it.
It's almost like in character because you saw at the beginning of the interview when I do that like that countdown and then like I breathe in, breathe out, do that countdown thing. That's
Yeah.
just like my way of like getting into the zone, into the character of whoever this is in front of you guys. It's still me. We got a question coming in from a friend of the show, Mark Freeman. Do you feel that working with big data is still critical for data roles, or is it mainly problem use case for large companies? There has lately been a big push about better quality data over just having big data. In reference to what you said earlier, stating that your master's included big data and background being in data engineering.
Yeah, there's this balance. Like everybody wants more and more data. Wow, data more and more, but in the end you can collect all the data you want, but you need to put some use to it. And if you're collecting a lot of data that you're not using for anything, it's dirty, it's unorganized, it's inaccurate, whatever it may be, then it's useless. So yeah, it's just as important having quality data, not just collecting and collecting just for the sake of collecting. So yeah, I mean, having quality data, I think we can talk to Susan about that, getting the coat on your on your data. I don't know if Susan's gonna log in too and log in at the right moment. But yeah, I mean, I know there's a lot of big believers in getting quality data out there, and I think it's a big struggle for all corporations, is just finding a way to organize all the data that we've got at hand, and also make it accessible for the right people. Knowing when you've got so much data, when you've got this big data, it's hard to have it like in the right hands. Even as a data scientist within a large organization, you don't. There's no way that you can know everything that's out there. So having some way to organize it and be able to access it in the way that you need is also a really big challenge.
It's almost like a way to think about data as well. Like it's I often okay, so I have this thing that I play around with on my desk just to try to make it back into a full cube. But to me, this is what it feels like when I'm doing data engineering tasks. Is I've got all these different disparate chunks of data, and I need to organize it into a cube, or take the Rubik's Cube example. Like it's all kind of mashed up, and your job is to kind of organize it and put it into like the nice Rubik's Cube thing. By the way, I've had this since Christmas, and I still have yet to put it together. It's quite difficult.
Good luck.
Um, yeah, I don't know, man. Like I was so I came from like more like a math-ish background, so I studied stats in grad school as well, and I was in uh, a biostatistician for like 5 years before moving into data science. And it kind of was vastly different for me because I didn't realize there was so much tech involved in data science, right? I was coming at it, mostly from, academic perspective, using mostly SAS and R and things like that. And it was challenging to confront these technology challenges. So did you how did you overcome that if you face that challenge at all? Like, I guess what I'm trying to ask is learning new things as they come up in your career. Like, how do you handle that? How do you manage that?
Especially relevant when you're working in tech and data science, just because it's always changing and there's always new things. And especially if you make moves in your career, you're probably going to, if you change from one company to the next, very likely they're going to have a completely different technology stack. And you are going to have to learn some new things. You're going to have to convert your skills into a different language or whatever it may be. So it's definitely, I would say, like going through these changes is difficult. It's a bit frustrating, especially coming into a new environment, and you feel like you're just climbing this uphill battle. But once you do get over it, it feels very satisfying. But how I handle it, I mean, I don't think I have. Again, I don't have any secret sauce to this. I remember that when I did my master's, which was I graduated in 2016, so business analytics and big data. It was a bit of a buffet masters because we got exposed to a lot of different technologies and a lot of different programming languages. We did, very intense R, very intense Python, very intense SQL. And then on top of that, learned a couple of random things. I know we learned like Hive, we learned MongoDB, just random stuff. But by being exposed to so much, it helped me have a good idea of everything that was out there. And then from there, as I moved from different workplaces, I was at Nielsen. Well, actually, I was first at SAS, the
Oh,
software
really?
company,
Nice.
SAS, yeah, and then Nielsen, and then Google. But every single place was very different in what they use. So every single time I was having to learn or modify my understanding of different languages and technology stacks to get on board. But I think I think nobody expects you to come into the place, come into the place sprinting and understanding everything. You should always have this ramp up time for you to get familiar with what you're going to be working with.
I got a love hate relationship with SAS. Like, I used that for like 5 years as a biostatistician. They had to take so
Typical.
many certifications for that thing. Like, I took 3 exams. Like, I didn't want to, but I had to. But it wasn't too difficult to learn. But switching from SAS to Python, so I started learning Python in 2017. After just using SAS and then R, uh, that was such a leap, man. Like, that was really challenging to make that leap from SAS to Python. Um, the only saving grace I had was the fact that I knew what I was doing in SAS, so I could do something in SAS and try to replicate it in Python and check and see if I got the same result, whether it was manipulation of data or whatever computation.
I made
That was
the
tough.
same leap, by the way.
Oh,
I
really?
did SAS to R and Python.
Mm.
But I do have a fun fact since we're talking about SAS. I actually studied at the university that invented SAS. A lot of people
Nice.
maybe don't know that. But I did my bachelor's studying statistics in the SAS hall. So literally in the building where they invented SAS, which is really cool. So
That is
I
pretty
have it
cool.
very close to my heart.
That is pretty cool. I feel like I was so underprepared in grad school, man. When I reflect back on grad school for us, it was literally like proofs. Like, I did nothing but solve proofs, and like that was it. Like, that was grad
It's
school.
very academic.
Yes, it was very academic, like with stats. Like, we used R in a few classes, but not enough. Like, it didn't like permeate the program. It was all by hand. It was rough. I feel like it really did. Like, if anything, it prepared me for a PhD. But even then, I feel like it was felt underprepared.
How did you learn, by the way, R and Python?
So R, I learned R when I was at UC Davis. Like, I picked it up there, and then we used it again in grad school. So I just doubled down on it. I just kind of just played around with it. One thing that I guess I could say I'm a natural at is I just programming languages just click with me. Like, it could be anything. and I can just pick it up real quick and understand it, whether it's like, VBA or that's like the first thing I did. So I worked as an actuary right out of grad school and doing a lot of work in Excel. So I was writing a lot of macros in VBA for Excel. And I just got exposed to it with one of my colleagues and I just picked it up from there and was able to just experiment, play around. Like I don't really care if I ever break anything. So that's something I have going for me. But yeah, it's just one of those things I just feel like I'm a natural at. Is picking up programming languages and writing
That's
and
very lucky.
communicating. Yeah. What about you? Is there anything that you feel like you're just a natural at?
I think not programming and not languages. Like I do have to study and really focus to get to wrap my head around them. Maybe I'm a natural, I would say, at like statistics, for example. So whenever I'm learning just statistical concepts and theories, they click with me really fast. And I love just pure statistics. So which is great, obviously a really good backing to have when you're in data science.
So what are you most excited about? Kind of, there's all these new technologies coming out. For example, StyleGAN 3 was just released recently, but there's not really a lot of new statistical methods I think that come out. Uh, are you like what excites you, I guess, in terms of the new methodologies and new technology that is coming out? Is it mostly the academic research stuff, or is it the cutting edge like deep learning stuff? What do you find more fascinating?
I mean, I can't think of any. I don't know of any statistical theories that are going to be new. Those are really tough to. It's a very old field, so it's tough to find something completely new. So I love like breaking edge new things, emerging technologies, and just to see where the future is going. I love reading just technology news and seeing all this new stuff. I think we were messaging about it as well at one point yesterday. We were talking about
Yes.
you were telling me about this metaverse or whatever it is that
Yeah.
Facebook is investing all this money to create this metaverse, I believe it's called.
Yeah.
Um, and I love stuff like that, but I think it links back to my love of sci-fi as well. So it makes sense. Like I love learning about these new technologies, and people are very much, I guess, people doubt the possibilities behind AR and VR. But people doubted the internet when it first came out, and people doubted cell phones when they first came out. So we never know what is going to be this next like revolutionary thing that completely disrupts the way that we live. And could it be the metaverse? Well, maybe. But I like reading about these types of things and kind of taking them with a sci-fi approach and imagining how our future could be.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I think we tend to just not be able to conceptualize how fast technology could change. Now, I was born in 1983. I'm kind of old. I remember when the internet first came out. I remember my first computer that I was working on was like a 386, and it had, I think, a hard disk of less than a gig. It was slow by today's comparison. I remember when the internet still had to like dial up in the early 90s. And now look how crazy it's become, like how integral it's been in our life. Like we wouldn't like this is an evolution of not even 30 years, which is insane. So just try to imagine what the next 30 years is like, this metaverse thing. Like it's interesting. So this is being
Yeah.
recorded October of 2021, and apparently next week Facebook is supposed to be changing the name of the company uh just to be more in line with the metaverse. um and I was listening to an interview with Mark Zuckerberg yesterday, just trying to figure out like what's this metaverse thing about. um is I don't know. The Sims is the only thing that I could compare it to, but there's a show on Amazon Prime called The Feed. I'm not sure if you've seen that or not.
No, what's it
Um,
called? The feed.
the Feed, yeah, and I think
Okay.
like on a long time scale, that is what the metaverse will become. With the descriptions that I've kind of heard people talk about what they envision it to become. So definitely check out The Feed. It's a super interesting show.
I
I
will.
think you'll enjoy that. Um,
Yeah.
so another question coming in from the audience here from Kevin. How do you practice being present during tough times and tie back to your purpose with the work you do? That's a good question, man. I like that.
Well, it sounds like a deep question. So what was it? How do you tie
Yeah.
back your purpose? What was it?
Yeah. How do you practice being present during tough times and tie back to your purpose with the work that you do?
Oh, that's a really deep question, a big one. So how do you stay present in tough times? I mean, I try not to be too negative, first of all. So everybody has their ups and downs. I personally, for example, just moved to New York City a couple months ago. We've had a lot of downs. We've had a really rough move for a lot of different reasons. And but at the same time, I've tried to keep my focus on what I'm doing. And even when you have, down times at work, you're not feeling confident in yourself, maybe one of your presentations went bad, just not letting the negativity bring you down, because you're going to have these ups and downs. Just think of, what is coming up next. So I don't know if that answers the question, but just staying present and always tying back to your ultimate goal, where you're trying to go. Do not let negativity bring you down. Just keep your head up, keep a smile, and move forward, and try to find, even when something doesn't go your way, like say you don't get a job that you were interviewing for, or you didn't get the promotion that you thought you were going to get. I always think of it that, like, things happen for a reason. So you might not have gotten this job, but it's because there's another door that's waiting to be open for you around the corner. So always try to, like, I try to move on very quickly, because I think that every single thing happens for a reason, and it's one thing is going to lead to the next. And it's definitely been the case in my journey. So I don't overthink things. I don't overthink negativity, because there's always going to be something better coming.
Absolutely love that. Love that response. Um, I For me, dude, I just remind myself that I'm gonna die. Like that's it. It's inevitable. It's going to happen, and it
Great way to look
happened.
at it.
Yeah, it's gonna happen any day. So, um, all right, what's there to be upset about? The universe
Yeah.
has been around for many billions of years before I was here. It'll be around for another 70 to 80 billion years after I'm gone. Uh, what's the big deal? Doesn't really matter, right?
Yeah,
Like, but
it's
in the
true.
most like positive way possible, right? Like, I don't use that as an excuse to just go do stupid stuff. If anything, just means that time that you do have is that much more special. So just enjoy it. In terms of tying it back to the work that I do, and like my work right now is interesting. I literally feel like I've got like the ultimate job that's for me. So I create projects, I write about them, and I communicate with people, and it's a very creative data science type of role, right? Like it's not necessarily dealing with like stakeholders and things like that, like the business aspect of data science. It's more just communication, education, and doing fun stuff. Yeah. And so
It sounds like something I would like to.
yeah, it's great, man. Like it feels like play. It feels like I'm playing. Like I sit here like, you know, all, all night just writing code and like doing stuff, and it feels like play to me. It's enjoyable. But then from the outside, people looking at me like my wife is like, why are you still working? I'm like, oh, I didn't even know I was still working. This is so much fun. Um, so let's talk a little bit about your experience being a woman in data, a woman in tech. I was wondering if you had any words of uh, advice or encouragement for the women in our audience who are breaking into or they're currently in our world.
Yeah, I can definitely give tips on that. First of all, and I think one of the first tips I would give, but this isn't just for women in tech, but it definitely helps as a woman in tech, but it's for anyone exploring or getting into this field. It's to find your passion. And I think of this because of what you just said, that you are just working all night and the time flies by so fast because you enjoy what you're doing. And everyone should try to find something that they enjoy. People get into data science for different reasons, but make sure that you truly enjoy what you're doing, or at least a part of it. Because when you are passionate about what you're doing and when you enjoy it, you're typically going to be good at it, and you're going to get better at it. You're going to continue growing and learning. So that's important. And then specifically for women in tech, just take advantage of networking. So meet other women in tech, maybe find others that you can look up to or a little bit more senior than you. Network with your local community. Maybe find if there's any organizations within your company or your school, but get involved. And it helps, I think, to hear what other women have been through in the field and to kind of give you that hope. Um, because I mean, we do sometimes get, we get put down or we get kind of ignored. in a field that could be very male dominated. So it helps to have other women by your side. And then also like supporting each other. So it's not just meeting these other women, but and you know maybe mentoring relationships, but also being very supportive of others, finding ways that you can bring other women up with you, and praising them, never putting someone down. So it's very important. And then and another a last thing I would say for women in tech specifically is work on your confidence. Learn how to sell your worth in the workplace. We typically do, our gender typically is a little bit more humble. Um, and there's statistics around this. There's statistics around how women do not negotiate, or they negotiate much less. They don't put themselves in the spot for promotions as often as their male counterparts. So there's a lot that you can work on this, working on your confidence, how to sell your work, and along with that, I would recommend checking out that you can search for "I Am Remarkable." It's an initiative with Google, but if you put "I Am Remarkable" dot with google.com, it's this initiative. It's a workshop that tries to help women, but also just minorities in general, how to bring up your confidence and learn how to sell yourself. Because it's not bragging when what you're talking about is facts. And it's learning how to do that because it helps take you very far in your career.
I also love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm wondering what can we do as a data community, talking to all the guys out there, what can we do to foster inclusion of women in data science and AI?
I think, and again, we talk about women in tech, but also just minorities in tech. Whatever minority it may be, whether it's an element of gender or color or culture, whatever it may be, but we should have diversity across tech. It's one of the fields that I think diversity is possibly the most important, just because technology now has creeped into all aspects of our lives, and it's affecting many parts of our lives. We need to make sure that the teams working on that tech and building these algorithms and products are also taking in mind all of the different types of people that are out there. So what can we do to help foster more women in tech, or whatever minority it may be? But it's just especially if we're talking about this male versus female, if you're a male in the field, help bring up your female counterparts. So try to be a little bit more aware of the situation. When you attend a conference, your next conference, for example, in tech, think for a second, how many of the speakers are male versus female? Most times in a tech conference, they're majority male. Next time you're sitting in a meeting, and maybe it's a meeting of engineers, take a second and think, how many people sitting at this table are male versus female? If it's majority male, there's a problem, and that typically happens. So finding a way that if you can be an ally and help fix the problem, and that might mean, for example, if you're in a room full of all male engineers, and then there's two females, making sure that they get their chance to have a voice at the table. And that might mean just calling them out and making sure that you're highlighting the ideas that they are saying. And I'm trying to think, I don't know if you have any experience as well, and if you've maybe noticed, if you've ever stopped to notice some of these things. But I know for me, when I was speaking at conferences, especially in person, I would notice it a lot more, that I would go to these conferences and get on stage, and I would realize that I would be one of very few women at that, on the stage at the conference. And then even in the audience, it would be a lot more male dominated.
Yeah, I mean, just the attendance at my data science happy hours that I host and the data science office hours, they tend to be very dominated by men. But I would love, I want more diversity and want more inclusion. I want more women to come and share their experience with leadership and share their experience with the problems they're working on and stuff like that. And I've been fortunate to have some awesome friends come on the show, but I want more. I want more of them to come, because it's I want that space to be for everyone. Like I'm very big on that inclusion and diversity thing. But it's weird
You've
for
got a
me
woman
being.
on the show today, so you get
Yes, that's right.
a plus point today.
There you go. Yeah. Well, that's one thing I am intentional about. Uh, nobody's noticed this, but for the longest time, I made sure that every episode I released was gender balanced. So if it would be, man, woman, man, woman, man, woman, just try to make it as gender balanced as possible. But then that became really hard for scheduling. But I just try my hardest to make sure everybody's voices are heard. Um, I love talking
And
to
this is a
scientists.
great way. This is a great way to show how you can make that extra effort to help foster more diversity within tech. Like this example is exactly what we need more of.
Thank you very much. Yeah, trying to
You're
do
welcome.
my part, trying to help people, uh, or help the community rather be, inclusive of all people. It's weird because everywhere I go outside, like I'm a minority, but in the field I'm not. It's all Indian people. It's we're rampant in the field, so it's the one place where I don't really feel like a minority. Um, but I love seeing how diverse it was. I had this preconceived notion that data science was all just like Indian people until I started my data science happy hour and I saw how diverse it was. That might be a byproduct of, the mentoring thing. I'm part of data science dream job. 95% of our students there are all Indian. Um, and so that was just my notion. I was like, oh, everybody in data science is Indian. But yeah, it wasn't until I started being more active on LinkedIn and hosting these happy hours that I saw really how diverse it is. It's an awesome space.
Yeah.
Let's do one last question before we jump into the random round.
Okay.
It is 100 years in the future. What do you want to be remembered for?
This is a very a very deep and powerful question. I don't know that I would necessarily need to be remembered. I don't need to be like famous or anything. I think my only goal would be to leave the world better. It was as a better place than when I came into it. So whether that means just, taking care of our planet, being a good person, contributing somehow to how society grows, but just making sure that I leave a good mark on the planet rather than hurting the planet.
I do love that. Leave it better than you found it. You've
Yeah.
definitely doing that. You've definitely left my podcast better for being on it. So thank you for swinging by. Let's go ahead and jump right into the random round. So you've done a lot of traveling, 50 countries. What's the most beautiful place you've ever seen?
I get asked that a lot, actually. So I did a lot of traveling, definitely pre-pandemic. And I always, when people find out, they always ask me, "Oh, what's your favorite country or what's your favorite city?" And when I get asked that, I do not have a top one. It's impossible to decide the prettiest place. But some of my absolute top memories are things like exploring Petra in Jordan, and then similar to that, exploring the pyramids in Egypt. I was actually in Egypt at the pyramids when the pandemic hit. We had to make a last minute decision whether we were going to cut our trip short, and we decided to stay in Egypt during it was like the pandemic was kind of exploding around the world in March 2020. Well, we were traveling at that time, and we ended up doing our whole trip and coming back, and they closed the borders of Spain a couple days after we got back. So we cut it
Wow.
really close, but it was worth it. I got to see the pyramids. So yeah, Petra, the pyramids. I also got to see the sunrise over Angkor Wat in
Oh, wow.
Cambodia. Yeah, that's a good one. That's very much worth it. And then another one is like camping in the Sahara Desert. So I did that in the south of Morocco. I've done that twice actually, and it's incredible. Being able to see the sky and the stars from the middle of the Sahara Desert when there's nothing around you, there's nowhere else that you can see the sky like that.
I can't even imagine, dude. That should be, oh
Yeah.
my God, that would be absolutely beautiful because you don't see many stars in cities. So ah,
You would be shocked at how many stars there are. When you go to like the middle of this very secluded place like the Sahara Desert, the sky is just covered in stars. It's crazy. So it's very much worth doing it. I've seen the sky like that from the Sahara Desert, and then also did like this camping thing in Oman.
mm,
In the country Oman, we also rented a car and drove across the country and did some camping in the desert there. And it was the same thing. We were in this very remote area and we looked up at the sky, and it's just like you just stare straight up and you can't look away because you've never seen the sky like it. You're looking into space, literally.
yeah, that's awesome. That is
Yeah.
absolutely beautiful. I love that imagery. Thank you for sharing that. Um, I guess I'll just share mine too. This one place that
Oh
just
yeah,
sticks
yeah.
out,
Tell me, because you've done
like
a lot of traveling, right?
yeah, but definitely mostly throughout Europe, and some other places. But um, I just have this memory seared into my mind. It was in Greece actually, and it was in Cape Sunion at
Hmm.
the Temple of Poseidon. So it
Yes,
was
I know
right up
it.
there,
I know it.
overlooking the Aegean Sea, and I had the entire thing to myself. Like there's nobody else there, uh, and so just sitting there, just seeing that, like it was just basically in that temple was I don't know how many thousands of years old, still just standing. Like it was insane. It's just a crazy
And
feeling.
and there's a Greek myth. There's a Greek myth at that cliff, a very famous story. I don't even remember the whole story now. And my Greek father would kill me for not remembering it. But I remember that I've been to the same cliff, and you should read up on the Greek myth, the mythology behind it.
Yeah, it was.
It's one about where. Do you know what I'm talking about or no?
Yeah, it's King Aegeus was sitting there waiting for his son to come back,
Son to come
and
back. Yeah,
they
yeah.
said, make sure that you have, I want to know if he's alive when he comes, so have the sails a certain
The
color. They
the
forgot to sail
flags.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah, and he
exactly.
and he
Yeah,
jumped, and that's why they named it the Aegean Sea. Yeah,
yeah. Oh yeah, you know it. You know it very well.
Greek myth
Well
is
done.
that. So it's another thing that like I love Greek mythology, so I know all these crazy myths. It's I read a lot of that when I was younger, a lot of Greek myths.
It's
Speaking of
interesting.
reading,
Very interesting.
what are you currently reading?
Yeah, I'm let's see. Right now I'm reading, and I've been slower to read lately just because I had so much going on with the move. But recently I started a really unique book that I found. It's called Iraq Plus 100,
Hmm,
and it's sci-fi, I have to admit, but it's arguably the first sci-fi collection of short stories from Iraq. So it's 10 Iraqi authors. It's originally written in Arabic, but translated to English. But 10 Iraqi authors, they were asked to imagine Iraq 100 years after the US occupation, and they write a sci-fi story about it. So
that's
very
interesting.
unique. Yeah. Yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah. But I do
That's
recommend it. I like it so far, and I recommend others check it out. It's Iraq Plus 100. And there's a similar one. I found this one because I read there's another one called Palestine Plus 100, and it's
hmm,
a similar concept. So there's just these two books, but super, super interesting.
definitely gonna check that one out. That sounds really, really fascinating.
Yeah.
What song do you have on repeat?
I'm have a song on repeat actually. I am or I was a big electronic house fan,
Mm,
and now I'm a little bit lazy. I don't have like a song. I just turn on house music to listen to during the day. A lot of times I log into group therapy radio. I don't know if you know Above and Beyond, but I
I
love Above
definitely
and
know them.
Beyond.
Yeah, they're
Okay.
awesome.
So I
Yeah,
love Above and Beyond, and I will just tune into this radio station thing that they have, and I leave that running.
yeah. Same here during the day. It's pretty much like progressive house trance music. Tom
Ah,
Ives put me on to a station on YouTube called Monster Cat Silk, and they have a few different stations, and the station I like is just YouTube. It's on YouTube, Monster Cat Silk. It's progressive house 24/7. So I just listen to that, just working and doing data science while I'm doing that.
and
Yeah.
I forgot to ask you, what book are you reading? I missed it. I missed it when
Oh,
you asked me.
yeah. So right now, most of my reading is directed by guests that I'm having on the podcast, which is fine because I,
Hmm.
I picked I picked the guests. But right now, reading. I just got done with this book by Marcus du Sautois, uh, Thinking Better. It's not released yet. I think it's being released next week. I got the advanced copy. They send me these books. This is a really, really good book. Just The Power of Mathematical Shortcut. Then also his other book, I listened to it on Audible, but about the physical copy as well. It's called The Creativity Code. And this is the book that I'm most interested in
That one looks
talking.
really interesting.
Yeah, it's called Art and Innovation in the Age of AI. So it's just all about deep learning and how deep learning has augmented human creativity in so many different ways. So this was a book that This is the main reason I wanted to bring him on the show to talk about this. But then during our email exchange, he's like, "Oh, let me send you a copy of my new book. We can talk about a few things from there." And I was like, "All right, great." Um, but then after this, I've got lined up the book by Joe DeSana, 10 Rules for Resilience. I'm interviewing one of them on the podcast and a couple other books. And then I'm wrapping up with podcast recording in November. Um, I'll stop in November and then I could just read. Plan on going back to read some Nassim Taleb. That's what I've got on.
Oh, Nassim Nicholas Taleb is
Yeah.
a classic. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. I just got done listening to Anti-Fragile on Audible. So I do both. Like I like to have audiobooks and I like to have the physical books. So if I like a book a lot on Audible, I will just go buy the physical copy. So that's how it tends to go. Let me go ahead and pull up the random question generator here. And
Oh,
the first
okay.
question is, what incredibly strong opinion do you have that is completely unimportant in the grand scheme of things?
This is such a random question. What incredibly strong opinion do you have? Like a really random one, and I think about it because I'm gonna eat some of them over a movie tonight. Is that do you know Sweet Tarts, the candy?
Yeah, absolutely love those.
Like I don't know how I have this random thought, but Sweet Tarts, the only ones worth eating are the red, blue, and purple.
That is kind of a random thing because they all
Well,
taste
it
the
says here
same.
completely unimportant. Okay, so really random.
What was your best birthday?
Best birthday celebration was skydiving over the Swiss Alps when I was 25.
Wow. We're gonna
Yeah.
skip this one. Do you have any
Okay.
nicknames?
Yeah, my husband calls me Glitty,
Liddy.
like glitter. Glitty, but
Ah,
like glitty, like for glitter.
I wonder if there's a story behind that.
There is, but I'm not even gonna get into
All
that.
right. Let's do one more here. What's your worst habit?
My worst habit is drinking Red Bull.
Yeah, that stuff will
Yeah.
kill you, man. That stuff will kill you.
But I don't drink coffee though. I drink tea, and then when I get really tired, I have a Red Bull. So it's my bad thing. What about you? To hear something interesting, what's your
Oh,
worst habit?
I instead of clipping my son's fingernails, I bite them off because he is too squeamy, and I'm afraid I'm going to take the top of his finger off. So I bite his fingernails off. So he's probably going to develop a fingernail biting habit because of um, that habit.
Yeah, you got to change that. You got to
Yeah.
change that.
Christina, obviously LinkedIn, but how can people connect with you? Where can they find you online?
Yeah, it's just LinkedIn. I would say connect, follow on LinkedIn, and then also follow the hashtag Book a Week Challenge, hashtag Book a Month Challenge. And both of those, you'll be able to see all of the books that I recommend, as well as all of the others that are a part of this initiative for reading. You have a lot of others as well sharing books. I've seen you sharing books with that hashtag too,
Mhm.
so
Yeah.
thank you. We're all sharing ideas, but yeah, just stay connected on LinkedIn.
Christina, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to come on to the show today. I appreciate having you here.
I loved being here today, so thank you for having me on.
And my friends, remember, you've got one life on this planet. Why not try to do something big? Cheers.